Which brings us to our feature review of the episode.
I guess so.
All right, let's get into Transcendence. So, directed by Wally Pfister. Of course, Wally Pfister was the director of photography on every single Nolan film since Memento, just how he's made his name. He's also, the other big name film he did was Moneyball. He lends that as well.
Oh, that looked amazing.
It did. For the film it was, it did look really good. So, Pfister's had a lot of experience in the field, but this is his first time actually calling the shots. And it's written by a certain Jack Paglin, who it's actually his first screenplay. It stars Johnny Depp, Rebecca Hall, Paul Bettany, Kate Mara, Cillian Murphy, Morgan Freeman, whole host of folks there, and...
you know who it also stars? Bane's mercenary from The Dark Knight Rises.
That guy!
I love that guy so much.
I forgot about him.
He's at the beginning of the movie, he says, the masked man.
Yeah.
Bane.
Yeah, no, I was wondering why I recognised that guy. Thank you for that. All right. So, basic plot, Dr. Will Castor, played by Johnny Depp, works towards his goal of creating an omniscient, sentient machine. A radical anti-technology organisation, that's a mouthful, fights to prevent him from establishing a world where computers can transcend the abilities of the human brain.
Well done.
Thank you. So, considering this is quite clear in the trailer, it's not a huge spoiler to say that the Dr. Will Castor dies quite early on in the film, and his friends try and preserve his consciousness by uploading it into a mega computer. Here's a clip outlining that.
Look, it's all built off of Casey's solution to the self-awareness problem. He did it 6 months ago.
He did what exactly?
Instead of creating an artificial intelligence, he duplicated an existing one.
Tell me you're joking.
He recorded the monkey's brain activity and uploaded its consciousness like a song or a
You're
movie.
out of your mind.
Will's body is dying, but his mind is a pattern of electrical signals that we can upload into pen. He can...
He's not a monkey! Assuming that implanting an electrode into his brain doesn't actually kill him, and that this works, at the very best, you'll be making a digital approximation of him. If we missed anything, a thought, a childhood memory, how will you know what you're dealing with? No one is saying that we give up, but we should be focusing our efforts on nanotechnology, synthetic blood cells.
Both are decades away. This is what we have now. We can save him.
So I guess hopes were pretty high for this film. I mean, it's funny. I've got a lot of correspondence over this film. We'll get to that a little bit later. But basically, people seemed really down on this, saying, oh, I didn't expect it to be any good. It looked terrible. I got to disagree. I thought that this looked really promising until we saw a trailer most recently that basically gives away the entire thing.
Yeah, just last week. It was really annoying because I hadn't really heard anything about it. All I knew was that it was Pfister's directorial debut, and I was really excited about that.
Yeah.
I didn't even know who was in it, really.
No, I didn't realize it was such a Batman-centric cast or a Nolan-centric cast. But yeah, it looked like a really promising sci-fi, I mean, interesting ideas, very timely ideas, of course. And so what did you reckon?
Okay, its central idea is inherently interesting, and I think there is a really interesting sci-fi buried away here. Unfortunately, this film just seems to take itself so seriously and so slowly as well. I mean, ideas are dragged out over scenes, and you are pretty clear about what that plot point is, and yet they spend another 20 minutes reinforcing that plot point and telling you about that. And all the characters are stony-faced, and especially Johnny Depp as the supercomputer. And then you get into the point that there are just huge plot holes that don't make any sense at all. And they almost sort of try and fix themselves with a bit of a third act rug pull, but then that just raises more questions, more problems.
Are you talking about the very last?
The very last thing that happens.
That was no good.
The film also opens with the sort of denouement, so you know exactly where it's going to go anyway. The opening voiceover gives away, I guess, what could be considered spoilers, tells you exactly how it's going to wind up, really. So the whole thing you're watching play out, you kind of know where it's going anyway, and that doesn't really help with the tension or lack thereof. I really didn't like this film. It didn't work for me at all. There are moments of brilliance, and there are moments of originality with the effects that are exciting to see. And in another film, probably would have been served a lot better. Unfortunately, because this film is almost aggressively stupid, but thinks it's really intelligent, it just kind of pissed me off because these ideas are interesting, and there are places to take them. And you could do this in a really schlocky B grade way, and it'd be fun. And you could do this in a kind of a high art way, as long as you put a little bit more momentum in there. But they don't. They just pull it all back, slow it right down, and explain everything over and over again to the point where you just want to yell at the screen. I can't believe how they messed this up.
I completely agree. It is outrageously dull for something that should have been so exciting. It almost parallels its own story in a way. So it's about trying to get into the idea of whether artificial intelligence can have a soul. And the film itself seems like it's trying to get into the idea of, can a sci-fi concept have any warmth or heart to it, or have any substance to it at all?
That's a good point, yeah.
and it comes off just completely, I mean, it seems to agree with itself. It doesn't. It has no centerpiece. It's strange, because a bunch of people have said that they actually cried at the end.
Really?
This has really worked for some people.
Okay.
I know that it's generally getting pretty poor reviews, but there's a lot of people defending it out there.
Oh, that's good to hear, I guess.
Yeah, because it's not. I mean, it's not something that you really want to hate, because
I don't.
At times, you're kind of cheering for it. It's like the guy that's running in the race is coming last, and you just feel for him, and it's trying so hard. It's got very interesting ideas. This whole idea of whether you can upload a human to a computer, and if it's still a person. It's just, you're right. It feels like we're always 5 steps ahead of the film. So as soon as we've grasped a point, and a lot of like that clip, a lot of the dialogue is really just too expository. Like, it's too bare. There's nothing, there's very little subtlety in this. So, by the time it gets around to moving on to the next thing, it feels like half an hour has passed, and it's just dreadfully slow.
Another problem is they seem to sort of overcrowd certain scenes with different genres. Like, at the start, you've got the doctor character played by Johnny Depp is essentially dying of cancer. So they're trying to have this very simple, tight family unit dealing with grief and dealing with someone slipping away. But they're weaving all this technobabble through that. So it's kind of distracting. You'd rather just kind of focus on one thing at a time. But they sort of cheapen this domestic drama by having all the computer stuff that is kind of outrageous, and these huge computer banks, and talking about this and that, and uploading consciousness and all that, and it just sort of takes away from something that could actually be connecting on some emotional level, but unfortunately it didn't for me. And then my major issue, I think, if I had to break it down, is the fact that Rebecca Hall, who plays the lead character, really, the lead human character at least, because she never once questions that the supercomputer, the fact is that Johnny Depp's supercomputer seems to have ulterior motives throughout the film, and is possibly doing things that are going to be working against the human race. And she never once considers that it's not her husband. She is, and that reason, she sort of sets herself up as being pretty dumb. And then you have to feel bad for her when these decisions you make don't work out that well. Whereas you've been telling her from the start that she shouldn't be so. She's a scientist. She's supposed to be one of the smartest people in the world, and yet she doesn't have any rationality.
Well, that's the power of love, Tom.
Ooh, yeah, that was a major issue.
So it is funny, because the amount of times terrible things happen. This computer is doing horrible things. She's being constantly reminded by people around her that this is a very bad thing. And then you think, I think she's just realized. I think she's about to, side with them. All of a sudden, they cut back to her, and she's just gone back to the computer. It doesn't make any sense. It's very hard to get behind this.
It's funny. There's a very telling moment very early on in the film where they sort of go on the run almost. They have to sort of get away and set up somewhere else. And she opens up her laptop or phone or whatever, and the computer has just stolen a bunch of money, like $1 million from somewhere, and put it in her account. And you think for a moment that there might be some sort of moral quandary there, where she goes, "Where did the money come from?" But she just goes, "Okay, good," and off they go. It's like, okay, so this character's not really that much up with the the moral questions here. She's just willing to go with the supercomputer.
I know.
Fine.
I think they tried to explain that with a throwaway line later on. This business has just made $38 million in a month or something like that, but it didn't. It didn't add up.
Yeah.
Everything that she does just doesn't really make any sense. And the whole technobabble, they try. You're right. Like, I think they wanted really to make a love story with a small knit unit.
Yes.
But they get so distracted from it. It feels like they can't decide whether they need to explain how this technology works, which just it's not going to make sense, because people don't know how to do it anyway. or whether they're just going to try and gloss over it, and they end up somewhere in the middle. So you get fed enough information to start working out the plot holes, but not enough for it to ever be interesting. And there's another huge thing about this. This becomes such a massive story, right? It grows in scope and importance, and this technology is threatening to take over the world. We're left with the same 3 or 4 characters that we started the movie with. And the whole, this suffers outrageously from that weird thing in movies sometimes where the FBI is embodied by one man. And you think, there's particularly towards the end, and they start essentially a battle with weapons and stuff that look like they're being used in World War I, just by a couple of guys. And this is an outrageously global problem, but there's still just, the 4 or 5 people we know.
I didn't even think about that. That's absolutely correct. That doesn't make any sense either.
There's this tiny world. There's this small world. No one else exists in this tiny world. It's it was strange. Didn't make any sense.
No. And this, I think... The film's 2 hours long. I could see about 45 minutes they could lose just because they labour points and basically they take very simple ideas and they just overload it with this incredibly weighty pretentiousness, and your brain starts to switch off after a while. You can't take it because you just want to get to the next point in the story. You want to feel what the characters are feeling, but you can't because they're just telling you things very earnestly and very seriously, and it doesn't make any sense. So major issues there.
Yeah, it also doesn't quite add up. I don't want to give away too much of the ending, but the way that they're trying to explain whether there is a soul in this computer or not. And then the way they start to tackle that and to explain whether it has ulterior motives or whether it's got genuine motives. And then the way they try and wrap that up, I don't want to go too far into it.
We should do a 5-minute spoiler thing at the end, maybe.
Okay,
It's a plot point that is worthy of picking apart and just asking why. And I don't want to spoil the film for people who haven't seen it.
Yeah. It doesn't reconcile properly at all, and it's really frustrating. One thing I did really like about it, though, is that at one point where we are going further into plot mechanics than I normally would like to, but I want to say a few things that I liked about it, so I'm going to mention it. The computer does start to essentially take over humans, and it almost becomes, for a brief moment, kind of like an old school 50s, 60s kind of horror sci-fi kind of thing. And
Invasion of the Body Snatchers, that sort of feeling. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah, and I found that really interesting. It's a shame that that's such a brief part of the moment, and that it just seems to gloss over, has these interesting ideas here and there, and it brushes over them so it can labor on these serious issues that really just aren't coming across.
And on that note, there were some great moments in that part of the film concerning people healing themselves from bullet wounds, which just looks so sci-fi and interesting and a bit creepy. And I just thought that was
T-1000-y.
Yeah, but really in a way that you've never really seen before. Like they actually use the CGI. They use it really well, which is something I don't usually say. Usually CGI distracts for me and takes me out of the moment, and I don't like it. But in this case, it was used so sparingly and so well that I just thought it had great moments. And it really added to the mood of the piece. Unfortunately, only for those small scenes, and then it was back to just boring talking again, and very, very serious.
I know, so serious. It's not to say that there's not anything wrong with a serious film. It's just that if you come across as dour and uninterested in yourself, then
nothing wrong with an intelligent blockbuster either. But this just forgets to be a sort of a film with any pace, I guess. I mean, I guess it's easy to compare it to a Nolan film, but if you look at Inception, and these are films with big ideas, like a lot of stuff going on under the surface, but the film just roars along at a cracking pace. And if there are problems, you don't really think about them until later. In this film, all you've got to do is sit there and think about the problems because
you're given far too much time.
Yeah, exactly. There's just nothing else to do.
One of the good things about it, I guess, is that it's an original film. It is trying to tackle an interesting issue. It's got the best of intentions, and it's something that we don't normally see. I think it was $100 million budget or something. That's a huge budget.
Really?
Yeah, massive budget.
You don't really see that money there.
I reckon the effects, they start to use them more and more. They look pretty damn convincing for what they are.
Yes, they do, but $100 million.
Yeah,
I guess there's a lot of big name actors in it as well. I mean, Johnny Depp alone must command a ridiculous price tag.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but it is. I'll just double check that figure because I saw that a few weeks ago. But it's weird to see a movie like that come up. I mean, Inception is probably the most recent one that springs to mind. The Adjustment Bureau was kind of like a smaller, had an original idea and not based off a existing property.
Oh, I thought that was a Philip K. Dick story.
Sorry, yeah, it was, but it wasn't. Actually, I guess that kind of negates that point a little bit. What I mean is that it's nice nice to see a hell of a lot of money go to what would have seemed like a very interesting movie at first. It's just...
Yeah.
Do you reckon it's like a case of a first... I mean, he's been around massive films for decades now.
Yeah.
But he's never directed. So,
Exactly. I think there are problems with that in terms of pacing and things like that. I think there is not enough experience there to get the story moving. But I think the screenplay is a major problem, and that needed to be tightened up. When I was watching it, you get the feeling sometimes when you've got a screenplay that has a whole bunch of names attached to it, and you just feel that there's just been arguments and arguments about what to do, and the compromises have sort of compounded, and it's resulted in this sort of messy film, which is a huge problem with Hollywood blockbusters usually. Whereas this film has a sole screenwriter, and I think it's the opposite problem. It's one guy being completely indulgent and no one telling him to trim the fat here and there.
Yeah.
There's just so much that's just so unnecessary and just there, and scenes that just give you exactly the same information the previous scene gave you. And so I think it's a combination of first-time screenwriter, first-time director, not knowing how to tell the story properly.
Yeah, yeah. And plus you got a massively flat performance from Johnny Depp, which is just bewildering.
Well, playing in your computer, I think that's okay. I kind of like he shows a tiny bit of life in those early scenes when he's playing his human version of himself, and I think he was trying to be quirky and trying to do something to differentiate from the computer version. So I didn't mind that. I like the fact they had literally 5 minutes to really set up who he was as a person before it started to go downhill. And
that's true. He's never really given a fair shot as a human character.
No. So, and I think you've got to be that flat as a computer, because I think they're trying to sort of withhold from the audience like how much of him is actually there. I mean, that's the whole point of the story. I mean, does he have a soul? Is he a man in a computer? Is he a machine pretend to be a man? All these things. So I'm okay with his performance, to be honest, but it does add to everything else of just being very dull.
Yeah. I'm not so sure that he got a lot of that charisma through in the early scenes. That's why I don't think there's much of a contrast. I just saw Johnny Depp being Johnny Depp in the beginning. He's got a little bit of that flair and that quirk. I really like the guy.
Sure.
But when it came to his, what is meant to be a flat performance, I guess, it's like a Keanu Reeves kind of intentional Day of the Earth Stood Still remake kind of thing. But it doesn't have any of that menace that like Hal from 2001 has, like, even just in that voice. I mean, that wasn't a present character at all, a human character. But there's so much menace just in that voice. And then when Johnny Depp is this computer with possibly ulterior motives, there is I didn't really feel a sense of threat at all. I mean, things start to get really terrible. It get really bad. And the world overall is at stake.
Yep.
And I don't really think that ever comes across.
No. It's funny, this is Johnny Depp's 4th film in a row to bomb at the box office.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's because last week this came out in the States, they got it a week early, and apparently it didn't get anywhere near the number 1 position. It was like number 3 or something.
Oh, man, it's taken, so it was a $100 million budget.
Wow.
It's taken only $13 million in the US.
Yeah, so it's probably not going to do very well elsewhere either. I mean, so yeah, I'm trying to think. There was definitely the Rum Diaries, which didn't go anywhere. There was Dark Shadows, which was a huge failure for both Burton and Depp, and then of course just recently there was The Lone Ranger. So Johnny Depp's just really not opening movies anymore. I mean, it's not to say that he won't with the next one, but his movie star, I think people are getting a bit fatigued with Johnny Depp.
It seems to be because he has terrible he's terrible at choosing roles. And there's this joke going around, I think there's an image you can probably find pretty easily, where people have compiled Johnny Depp's roles and how he seemingly chooses them on the different types of headwear.
Yeah.
And this is no exception, because the poster for this has a million wires attached to his head. It seems like if he can do something different with his hair or wear a hat, then he'll take the role. Yeah. And I think he needs to be slightly more discerning than that. He needs to get a new agent that's not so obsessed with the hat situation. Yeah. So no, look, I guess that's about it. I've got a bunch of feedback. This is really funny. Like, we started doing this show because we thought there was a lack of Australian weekly film podcasts covering.
Yes, because we couldn't find any.
Couldn't find any. Covering like the big films of the week and doing it consistently too. And so since we started that, our Australian audience has remained steady, but the Americans have vastly taken over. So all of our correspondence is coming from like Florida, from California, things like that. I will just sneak this in because Lindsay Roth from Palm Beach wrote in and said this is a fairly decent argument for the emotion of the film actually working for someone.
Okay, good.
So I can only read out a little bit of what Lindsay's written because a lot of it is going to give away the final. The conclusion of the film. She's basically saying that despite negative reviews, she found much to like about the movie, thinks the final message is what makes the film, and liked the juxtaposition of themes, and was pretty satisfied emotionally with how it ended overall.
Well, I will admit, I kind of agree with her because the whole film I was sort of uncomfortable, and I didn't like where it was going, and it didn't make much sense. The ending did make me question whether or not it was actually a really good film at the end of the day, and I've been struggling with that since last night when we saw it. I'm still not convinced the ending saved it, but it did make me look at it in a different way. But like I said earlier, it also raises more problems, which I'd like to talk to you about in the spoiler section, because it's a very interesting way that it chose to end it.
That's right, yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I actually thought that the ending was really problematic, but it does seem to have worked for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So if you're listening for the first time, occasionally we do spoilers. We've been doing these more frequently recently.
There's been more films that have sort of demanded it lately, I think.
Yeah.
Just with the contentious ways that the plot wraps itself up, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So what we do is we just quickly wrap up the show with some Blu-rays coming out and stuff like that. We play the end credit music, and then we're back if you want the movie spoiled or if you have seen the movie.
So Blu-ray this week, in Australia at least, we've got Frozen, which I kind of thought was already out, but apparently it's just being released this week on all manner of Blu-rays and DVDs and 3D Blu-rays and stuff.
So we completely missed the news 3 weeks ago that it's beaten Toy Story 3, it's now the biggest animated film of all time.
Are you serious?
1.1 billion grossed at the cinema.
Beating Toy Story 3, that's a huge ask.
Yeah.
For a non-Pixar film as well, that is crazy.
Both Disney, but so they're doing pretty well. But they were very, very close. I think it was like overall, and this is just international box office, nothing to do with home release. It took 500,000 more to reach 1.1 billion, I think.
I really like the film. I know that you don't, but I even liking the film, I'm surprised at the phenomena. I can't believe that it's connected with people like it has, or at least small children who beg their parents to watch it again and again and again. But
it's been a very surprising hit.
12 Angry Men's getting a Blu-ray release here, which is quite exciting.
I didn't realize it wasn't on Blu-ray yet.
Apparently not. Maybe this is a different version or something. I've had it on a Criterion for ages, but it's very likely that it wasn't out in this country until now on Blu-ray. Along with another old favourite of mine, Judgment at Nuremberg, which is a really sort of portentous, overwrought political drama, courtroom drama about the war crimes, very serious stuff. A whole host of amazing actors. Spencer Tracy plays a judge in his later years. You've got a great cameo from Montgomery Clift, which he was nominated for Best Supporting. It's a hell of a film. Really sensational film. Burt Lancaster, of course, is one of the leads. So that's definitely worth checking out, guys. And the other newer film out this week worth mentioning is Philomena, which Dave and I both loved.
I can't believe how much I love that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could redo my end of the year list from last year.
That much.
I really found it incredibly moving.
So next week, we haven't quite decided. There's only 2 films out next week, in wide release at least. In fact, not even wide release, either of these. You got the new Arnie film, Sabotage, which has been destroyed by critics everywhere. Apparently, it's terrible.
Yeah, and you were really looking forward to it.
I was really looking forward to it. It looked like a proper 80s angry, violent action He-Man sort of film, which is not the sort of thing I usually like, but I liked how unashamed it was about just throwing back to those sort of films. It could be fun, but apparently it's not fun at all. And the other film is Fading Gigolo, which is John Turturro's, I believe, directorial debut. He might have directed one other film.
Yeah, I'm not too sure on that. Yeah.
But the interesting note about this film, it not only stars John Turturro, it also stars Woody Allen, who no one's seen on screen in his own film or anyone else's for quite a long time. So, we saw the trailer for this the other day. I was intrigued. It looks like it could be a nice film.
It actually does look, like a really interesting kind of pleasant, diverting movie.
Yeah.
So the problem with this is that if we ever do smaller movies like this, no one really just seems to care that much about the film. So I'm not sure how
neither
we're
of these movies are very appealing to anyone. So I don't know what we're going to do next week.
You know what's really irritating is that I think about 2 or 3 weeks later we start to get 3 movies a week, and we can only cover one.
I know, it'd be nice if they could break it up a little bit for us.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll play the credits, get back into some spoilers for Transcendence, but in the meantime, you can email us at podcast@silverscreensnobs.com. Tom's on Twitter at snobspodcast. I'm on Twitter at SSSnobs, and you can subscribe to the show. You can find all the past episodes and Facebook links and all that stuff from silverscreensnobs.com. Oh, and we're finally on Instagram, which I tended to for about 2 days and then almost completely forgot about because I just think people just weren't interested. So, I mean, yeah, Twitter's fine. Apparently,
way to sell it.
Yeah. I know. Well, I thought I hadn't mentioned it on the show yet. I might as well, but if it doesn't pick up in the next few weeks, I think it might be going.
Get it while it's hot, kids.
Yeah.
All right. Silverscreensnobs.com. See you next week. Stay tuned for Transcendence spoilers. Okay, welcome back to Transcendence spoilers. So, the entire film, I think I was angry because it seemed so obvious that he was an evil computer. And like I was saying, she was so dumb for believing him wholesale all the time. And then when they do the reveal that, in fact... So, what is it? He's actually trying to heal the entire planet, right? Using his nanobots or the nanobot technology to purify water and rebuild rainforests and things.
I guess that's the idea.
There is a sort of a point where he has to choose at the end. He knows she's got a virus in her, and he says to them, I can either upload the virus and kill myself, or I can save her life. Was that the choice? Did I read that right?
Yeah.
So, even though uploading the virus would not, like, he was going to damn the world, apparently.
Yes, he was condemning the world to a dark blackout situation, which is basically what happened.
Yeah. Or he could save the world the way he was doing, which is what she would have wanted. I just don't understand. If he was right all along and he was doing good things, why did he throw it away at the end? Yeah. She was going to die anyway.
I know. I honestly didn't understand why.
It was the dumbest decision ever.
It was a poor decision. And also, if his intention the whole time was to heal the world in this manner, he went about it in a really destructive, malicious, very malevolent way. A very, which is kind of really hard to get behind, and I don't think that just having, the rug pulled at the end and saying, well, actually, he had really good motives, I don't really think it adds up, because you look at everything he was doing and how he was going about it, and for apparently a superior intelligence, and apparently with an intelligence with a conscience as well, which is like the crux of the issue.
Yeah.
He didn't seem to display any humanity or warmth or understanding or intelligence about going in the way he went about it.
And the very telling moment where Morgan Freeman's character comes in and poses him the question that Pin could never answer about how do you know you're self-aware, and he repeats the exact words that Pin uses. I mean, all these things it doesn't add up. Like, it seems like the story was written one way, and then someone came in at the last minute and said, let's just make it so it was him all along. They didn't really consider everything that was building up to that.
Yeah, you need it to make sense.
It didn't ring true for me at all. If it was him all along, and that's what he wanted to do, like, why didn't he keep doing it? It didn't... Oh, man, it was really irritating. I mean, the two of them at the end intertwined in the bed, I mean, very nice. And I did feel a little something. Like, I was like, oh, well, that'd be nice if that made sense, but it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't understand, because I guess if he's trying to save the world, but ultimately he's ended up destroying it.
I mean, I know he didn't destroy it, but I mean, he was on track to undoing the damage humans had done to planet Earth, and then he just stops for there's no one wins if he stops doing it.
That's right.
If indeed that's what he was doing, which I just don't think it makes any sense, really.
Well, I don't understand why he had to go about it in such a destructive way. It's
There's also other problems with just the general plot. So he's got these nanobots that are apparently everywhere, and yet somehow he doesn't realize the military are approaching until they're like 500 meters away. They drive through a puddle and then he realizes.
And what was with that's a good point.
Yeah.
But why was the military in one truck and it had two guys using a cannon launcher from
I don't know.
the First World War?
I'm glad you brought that up in the normal part of the show, because I didn't even think about that, but that was really weird. Why didn't they just drop a nuke on it?
It's a serious situation. And if the army's gonna send in their one best man, and the FBI has assigned their one best man, and the best they can do is hire a pickup truck and somehow find some ancient military equipment, it just doesn't.
And why did they even go to the town if they knew the town was under control of his drones? You know, why didn't they go the other side of the place and not risk getting attacked?
That's right. It's kind of like that bullet situation where you only get hit by a bullet if the character needs to be hit by a bullet. They walked right into the mouth of the monster, and they're fine. People who need to be fine are fine.
Yeah. And the other thing is, considering he can read her body movements and he knows her levels of estrogen and everything inside her, did they really think that he wasn't going to know there was a virus in her? And that she had, ulterior motives when she went to see him out of the blue after she ran away. Like, everything doesn't make sense. Everything is just not well thought out. At least not for that ending to work.
I guess it's a problem when you're writing a character that is meant to be the most intelligent thing of all time.
Omnipresent. You can't really trick an omnipresent being, can you?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's some, I can't remember exactly how the saying goes, but, the movie characters are only as intelligent as the screenwriter. And I'm not saying that the screenwriter is unintelligent. I'm just saying that if you're going to try and present the most intelligent thing that humans have ever seen, you're really going to have to up your game and work out some of these plot holes and make it an intelligent being.
Absolutely.
Because it's just full of errors.
I think his reach really exceeded his grasp in this case, because nothing really came together at the end.
No.
All right, I guess that's all I wanted to bring up. I was just I think I just wanted to make sure that you had the same idea about the ending that I did. He had a choice to make, and he made a very odd one, considering he was super smart.
Yeah. So undo everything he's done, set the world back, or save. I guess maybe he was worried that if that he couldn't control himself later on if she wasn't around. He didn't want to be around if she wasn't.
But that was the thing. He could have saved her. That was the choice.
Yeah.
If he saved her, he could have saved her life and kept on healing the planet.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So,
and he would have been alive in that body he made as well. So that would have been awesome. So why didn't he do that?
Yeah, so it's a win-win instead of a lose-lose. He chose the lose-lose.
He did.
Yeah,
everyone's dead, and the planet's going to go back to being destroyed by humans.
Yeah.
What an idiot.
At least the movie was over then.
Yeah.
Oh, and what was with the last shot? That typical horror movie, here comes a sequel.
Well, you know what? No, I didn't see sequel. I saw, the fact that it was preserved under that copper wiring or whatever it was, so he had a garden where they could both coexist in the rain as nanobots.
Yeah.
I mean, that was actually really... That was good. I liked that.
Okay.
I just have an issue with how they got to that point. I mean... What a way to wrap the film up. And I feel like that was the seed that had this screenplay sprang from. I think the screenwriter knew he wanted to end it that way, and he had that perfect idea about the water motif. And I did enjoy how that wrapped itself up. But the fact that they got there in that manner was really, really stupid.
Yeah, I think it was what led to that moment that made me just see it incredibly negatively.
Yeah. All right, that's Transcendence. Let's go. Let's go home.
Okay, we're done.
Good night.
I'm finished.